Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to the Reawaken Your Health podcast. Joining us today is Jenn Trepeck, who recently met, and she has a wealth of knowledge and experience in the healthcare world as a health coach. She also has her own podcast, which she can share a little bit about as well for those of you who are looking for more information on nutrition. But today we are going to be talking about some of the myths around nutrition, the food pyramid, and a lot of common topics, but she has some of the science behind it and how to help you navigate what you hear out in the media and just from everyday people. So thank you so much for joining us today, Jenn. A really
Uh,
pleasure to have you here.
well, thanks, Amy. I'm excited to be here.
This is great. So I know a little bit about your background, but I want to share a little bit more so people have an idea of where you came from. So if you don't mind telling us a little, how did you end up here as a health coach, business consultant, and podcast host?
Yeah. So my background is really business and marketing.
Okay.
And like so many of us in this space, I came to all the wellness stuff through my own saga. I call it a saga because I feel like the word journey like doesn't do it justice. You know,
Yeah.
like there was drama, right? It was a saga for me of really primarily weight management and my health and kind of trying to figure all this out. I was a dancer growing up and but I sort of joke that I was like the skinny one in a family of dieters growing up. And then that went away. It was like, okay, now I need to figure this out like everybody else. And I was like, all right, I know what to do because I watched my whole life, and I did every diet under the sun, gained and lost living that roller coaster of life. And it's funny, even when I learned about the curriculum that I've now based my practice on, I was like, no, 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 that's okay. I've got my thing. My thing was the crazy roller coaster, but I didn't need whatever, they had, whoever it was. Um, but I got more information and I saw people who were following this curriculum. And number one, I noticed that they were keeping the weight off. So that was one. And then the second thing was this woman told her story of removing like 150 pounds.
Impressive.
Right. And I
Yeah.
was looking at her and I'm like, also, by the way, anything she said after that, I didn't hear because I was having a conversation with myself in my own head. I'm like, this doesn't even compute. Like, I can't see where 10 pounds could have been on this woman's body. And she's telling me that the equivalent of another human was attached to her,
Yeah.
you know? And I had this moment with myself that was like, Jennifer, they know something you don't know. Because with everything you know, that doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
And I worked with a coach. I followed the curriculum. It completely changed my life. Like the only thing that allowed me to say I'd kicked my food issues.
Wow.
And so from there, I was like, everybody deserves this information. To me, it was the nutrition education we're all supposed to know, but no one ever taught us.
Mhm.
And so I was like, everybody deserves this.
Mhm.
And then I was also like, well, why isn't this what we learned? And where did all of those things come from?
Yeah.
And so I started working with clients. I became a health coach. I started working with clients nights and weekends on the side of my full-time job. So this was like late 2007. So before side hustles were a thing, before, health coaching was even as mainstream as it is now. And um, it's been a total labor of love and the best process with my clients. And as things come up for them, or as things were coming up for me, I'm just like an insatiable student and start to dig into, well, where's the research and what do we know and how is this possible? Because it's not just one person having this experience. Like, as much as we are all special flowers, like the experiences and challenges that we have around this stuff are very common,
Yep.
you
Yep.
know? So I built my practice on the side for 12 years. I left my full-time job July of 2019, and that's when I launched my podcast, Salad with a Side of Fries. Um, so it's coming up on 5 years of Salad with a Side of Fries. So, yeah,
Congratulations. That's wonderful.
thanks. Yeah.
Well,
And now I get to be here talking to you.
absolutely. Yes. So when you talk about this nutrition education that we should have gotten, but haven't, or we think we know,
Yeah.
what comes up as kind of the biggest thing that people just get wrong or haven't learned yet that you're like,
Yeah.
I wish everyone knew this?
Yeah. Well, there's a few things. Um, I think the one at the top to
Mhm.
start is the role of grains
Mhm.
and carbs.
Yes.
And these two things get conflated a lot, right? So the body's preferred fuel is carbohydrates.
Mhm.
The carbohydrates that the body really needs are the ones from vegetables and fruit. So, yes, vegetables and fruit are carbs. So, not like let that sink in because I think that's news for a lot of people, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And then when it comes to grains,
Mhm.
there's sort of two things. One is the average American eats more grain than an Olympic athlete is recommended to eat on race day.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. And part of it goes back to that food pyramid that many of us grew up on, which was then changed to the plate, but it still didn't really shift the balance of nutrients. Um, and so, what we don't need is as much grain as we get.
Mhm.
We also don't need the refined grains or the processed grains. So, yes, okay, people say whole grain. Okay, great. I'm eating my rice.
Mhm.
Well, if you're eating the microwave in 60 seconds and ready rice or the boil in a bag in 10 minutes rice,
Yeah.
those are also refined grains.
Mhm.
And so there's a big swing, a big spectrum of what it means to enjoy grains,
Mhm.
right? And so carbohydrates and then understanding grains is a giant misconception. I'm a big fan of truly whole grains. They're just very difficult to find and not the easiest foods for us to sometimes use on a daily basis, despite what everybody thinks.
I imagine if we found the whole grains and used that as much as we did all the refined grains, I don't even think our stomach could handle that much. To be honest.
Correct.
It would be too
Correct.
much for
Yeah.
us to even process. I mean, you would be so full, you wouldn't want to eat.
Right. We'd be so full. On top of that, um, we also wouldn't have the same necessarily instance of food sensitivities and issues around grains because there's also a difference between ancient wheat and modern wheat. So the more we go to the truly whole grains and the ancient grains,
Mhm.
right, more people would be able to tolerate them
Yeah.
and we could keep them in proportion with the rest of our nutrition.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, this is great. And I'm glad that you're touching on the ancient versus modern because not many people talk about that. So that's great that you're aware of that and you educate people on that. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. And I mean, just to speak on that for a second, specifically with wheat.
Mhm.
So modern wheat was created. First of all, the guy, I can't remember his name, but he won like the Nobel Peace Prize for solving world hunger when he
Okay.
created modern wheat. Okay,
Oh,
well, what we haven't seen is the resolution of world hunger.
nope.
And what we have seen is a dramatic increase in challenges around gluten.
Mhm.
And we'll hear it from people all the time that in the US, right, they can't eat bread. It doesn't agree with them, whether they are just, gluten sensitive or have, fully celiac or an autoimmune condition. Um, but a lot of them can go to Italy and eat pasta and not feel the same
Mhm.
as eating whole wheat pasta here,
Yep.
right? They could eat regular pasta there. And a lot of that's because the wheat that is grown elsewhere, the wheat that they're using in other parts of the world is not this modern wheat, which has multiples the amount of gluten as ancient wheat.
Mhm.
So this it tracks a little bit to reading our labels on foods and kind of starting, especially if we're challenged by some of these things, picking our battles, certainly, but getting a little particular to know what we're actually having, to know what we're choosing each day.
Right. And that makes sense. And that also comes into play with what are we recommended. So one is knowing what we're actually putting in our body, and then we listen to other people. And let's talk a little bit about this food pyramid slash plate, because that's where I remember my mom used to show it to me, or we learned it in elementary school, and you look at it and this beautiful little pyramid and what we should have. But I left that long behind a long time ago.
Yep.
And I'm curious, what are your thoughts about it now? What's common out there nowadays that you find when you're working with clients that you're having to debunk in terms of what they think about that?
Yeah. So let's just fundamentally look at, where did the food pyramid come from,
Yeah.
right? We were sort of taught that this is how you're supposed to eat. And like your mom, we assumed that that was about health
Mhm.
and nutrition. It
Yep.
was actually about economics.
Yeah.
It was about getting us to eat what we grow in this country. So at the time,
Got it.
we were a lot of corn farmers, right?
Yep.
So, and wheat and now soy, but
Mhm.
so it was really designed to push people into eating what we grew in this country. And then you look at the recommended daily intake,
Yeah.
right? Or the guidance, like on your nutrition facts on a food label of like on the box or a package, right? And you have those percentages on the side. That's the percent of our daily nutrition that, this nutrient or food is going to give us of that nutrients. So your RDI, the recommended daily intake, was developed around World War II for feeding our military in an effort for them to not deteriorate into rickets and scurvy. So it was the minimum requirement
Got it.
so they could survive,
Hmm.
not for health, not for all systems to work and support each other.
Makes sense.
So what that's led to now, right, with all of us and the foods that we eat, is that we have a giant misalignment in terms of the nutrients that we're getting. We have a lot more of those grains, right? The bottom of that food pyramid, or the biggest part of the plate. Because
Mhm.
what happened with the plate is there was a minor shift in proportions, but not really, right? Only recently, like in the last year or two, have the recommended daily intake guidelines shifted a little bit for protein. So they've increased a little bit for protein, but it's still certainly not what we see actually promotes health
Mhm.
and longevity for people.
Yeah.
And last I checked, we're all humans. So there's certainly elements of this that are very individual, right?
Ma-
And then there are also elements that really are fundamentally human. So along those guidelines, and this is still, I was actually on a webinar with a registered dietitian the other day, listening to her, make some recommendations. And so these are still the recommendations that are taught and um, provided to people in medical settings and all these kinds of things. But, even on the protein front, the recommendation was the palm of the hand,
Mhm. I remember
which is
that.
actually, yeah, that the deck of cards size amount of protein.
Yep.
This goes back to calories in, calories out.
Mhm.
This goes back to grains are supposed to be the majority of our nutrition and really is insufficient.
Mhm.
So, what I want everybody to think about instead is, for protein at a meal, it's your whole hand. That palm, or a little less than your palm, is for a snack. So,
Mhm.
yes, every time we eat, we are looking for protein.
Mhm.
Whole
That's
hand for a meal,
yeah.
palm or a little less for a snack. And so what that translates to for biologically female bodies, that's
Mhm.
about 4 to 6 ounces at a meal. For
Okay.
biologically male bodies, that's about 6 to 8 ounces at a meal.
Okay.
And for everybody at a snack, it's like 2 to 3 ounces.
Okay. Yeah. Now, a lot of fruits and vegetables have protein in them too. So do
Yep,
you count that into your whole hand?
absolutely. Absolutely. Right. And think about too, let's say we're doing, um, you know, for some people who are fine with dairy, right? Let's say we're doing a Greek yogurt, walnuts, and berries, right? Well, we have protein from the walnuts, about an ounce of protein from the walnuts, depending on how much you have. Depending on your Greek yogurt, it could be a couple ounces of protein there, right? Your
Mhm.
berries are more fiber than they are protein.
Of course
But
it is.
even still, right? Things in our meal, we're going to build a plate. So it doesn't have to be only one source of protein,
Mhm.
right? We're going to build this snack, build the meal
Yep.
to give us the nutrients that the body needs. So it doesn't all have to come from one source. And some people don't necessarily want to dig into the interwebs to find out, well, how much protein actually is there in my broccoli, right? So great. Let's count the broccoli as your fiber. Serving is about a handful,
Yeah.
right? And let's look at, some salmon or shrimp or organic tofu,
Mhm.
for our protein. You could even use nutritional yeast as an awesome plant-based protein. So there's options out there. And
Mhm.
again, we can sort of piece things together to meet the needs that we're looking for.
That's awesome. And the reason I bring up the vegetables and fruit having protein is most people don't realize that.
Yes,
And they think, well, if you just eat fruits and vegetables, you're not getting protein. And I'm like, actually, you do. You really do. And maybe you want to have obviously more protein as you're recommending, and you can find stuff with a higher concentration of protein in it, but you are still getting some. At least it's contributing to your total. That's all. I just
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think to your point too, I think that's where grains come in. So especially as everybody these days is leaning more and more toward plant forward, right?
Mm,
If not fully plant based, but at least plant forward, which I'm a big fan of. But here's the catch.
yeah.
Doesn't necessarily mean we're eating plants. So, what I want you to actually do is eat plants, which
Mm,
are your vegetables and your fruits, and then some of your truly whole grains.
right.
So, our truly whole grains do have more of that protein,
Mhm.
you know, in, in the volume.
Mhm.
But also, if people are struggling to meet the body's protein requirements, if you're noticing that you don't have a ton of energy, right? If you're noticing that you're craving sweets all the time,
Yeah.
you're noticing that you're not sleeping particularly well, your memory isn't working great, your mood's a little off,
Mhm.
right? Then we want to look at what are our protein sources? Maybe our health would be served by creating some variety and adding some things in there. So, what that can look like,
Mhm.
right, is maybe testing some of the animal protein or doing different grains and combining them with different beans, right? So that we're getting all of the amino acids that we need.
Right.
And then to your point before of the volume of food, that's where I sort of describe grains as a little inefficient,
Mhm.
right? So if we're using the grain as our protein, the volume of grain that we have to eat to actually get a couple ounces of protein
Mhm.
also comes with it a lot of other carbohydrates that have the potential to spike our blood sugar,
Mhm.
right? So the balance there, it's a little inefficient versus saying, oh, I could actually then have, a half a cup of chickpeas with that and not, end up with, sorry, just hit the mic, not end up with, cups and cups and cups of rice.
Right. Right. And that actually leads me to another topic is portion sizes. Because if you're eating more plant-based, your portion might be bigger
Right.
versus if you're eating more meat carnivore based, your portion size might be smaller. So that how do you address portion sizes for people?
Yeah. So we want to think about portion sizes based on the nutrients and then how you get to that. right, will adjust. So my favorite thing, I had this conversation with a friend of mine the other day of like, what's a portion? And I taught her what I teach the kids and families that I work with.
Mhm.
Okay. So vegetables on our plate
Mhm.
are both hands. If you put both hands together, kind of line up the sides of your pinkies and your palms, right? So two handfuls, both hands, that's our veggies.
Okay.
One hand, whole hand, is our protein,
Makes sense.
and a fist
Mhm.
is our whole grain,
Okay.
right? Or our starch.
Okay.
So if those are the categories, right? Well, how are we getting to our fiber, the vegetables, right? How are we getting to the protein? If part of our grain or starch is for protein,
Mhm.
then it's going to be part of that other category too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So it's going to adjust in that way. But I like those guidelines because I don't know about you, but I'm not living my life with like measuring cups and a food scale in my handbag. Right.
No.
So I'm a big fan of eyeballing it and then using your hands. Once you start to adjust to those sort of guidelines, then you'll be able to start to figure out when you feel your best. Right.
Yeah.
I notice I have better energy when my bigger meals are breakfast and lunch.
Mhm.
Right. I sleep better. I wake up before my alarm when I don't have caffeine, when I make sure that lunch is a bigger meal than dinner.
Yeah.
All of these kinds of little things. So we can start to tweak it for ourselves once we can sort of figure out these guidelines. Because I think also, you know, intuitive eating has become another sort of fad onto itself these days. And I'm a big fan. I just don't think that we get there by flipping a switch. I think there's a progression of going from all the rules and all the things that we've heard and everything everybody's told us to
Yep.
then make our way into relearning the signals of the body because we've taught ourselves out of paying attention to those.
Mhm. And when you're used to eating more processed foods, the signals that you're getting are more related to the chemicals in the processed foods when you're initially transitioning to more whole food. So the signals you're listening to may not be fully dependent on what your body needs when you're transitioning. So I get that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you had mentioned kind of for your hands in terms of proteins and carbs. What do you do for fats?
Yep. So fat we want a couple times a day,
Mhm. Yeah.
and we want quality fat. So quality fat is olive oil, avocado oil, our nuts and seeds, our um, sardines and anchovies. I know y'all hate that one. It's gross. I get it. But those are our omega 3s, right?
Sure.
Those are best sources of omega 3s.
Yes.
Um, and then avocado is another great one, right? So a serving size of avocado is half of the avocado.
Yeah.
And everybody is like stunned right now. I know because people always say to me, "Oh, I had my fat. I had a half of a quarter of a sliver of an avocado." And I was like, "What?" Like, eat the avocado. You're going to be fine. Right?
Yeah.
A lot of times, if we're not getting enough fat in our nutrition, you're going to notice it in your bowel movements or lack thereof,
Mm.
right? You're going to notice it in your skin.
Mhm.
You're going to notice it in how hungry you are again after you eat. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of pieces where we can actually start to notice the deficiency of nutrients in our nutrition once we know what we're looking for and how to sort of decipher those signs. So the rule of thumb about, serving size for an oil is usually about a tablespoon, which you can eyeball, right? Like, and
Yes.
I also say to people, like, we didn't get here from your olive oil. We didn't get here from avocado. So relax. Like it's all going to be fine if those are the oils and the quality fats that we're choosing.
Mhm.
If we are choosing refined oils, if we are eating a lot of processed foods and we are getting those hydrogenated oils, that's where we're going to see challenges around our health.
And it makes sense too. And one other thing related to fats that I've noticed with women is it impacts hormones.
Absolutely.
So I just like to mention that if you want to touch on that more, feel free. But I just know that if you're not having enough fats, be very careful if you're a woman and you're having some hormonal difficulties.
Absolutely. And fundamentally, the body knows what to do,
Mhm.
right? And the body is designed for survival. So your body's going to compensate. Your body's going to do anything it can do to survive and make things happen and to fill in those gaps.
Mhm.
So your body might start to hold on to fat
Mhm.
in an effort to balance your hormones,
Yeah.
right? And in order to burn fat as fuel, our hormones need to be in balance. So there's the magic of the body is that it is so intricately connected. And so when we address one thing, it actually snowballs into a whole host of things. And the good news is the things that we're thinking about for our metabolic health are the same things that will also support our hormone health and will also support our cognitive health and will also support our longevity, right? And our cardiovascular health and all these things. The good news is you don't have to do different things for our heart than for our metabolism, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We need real food. We
Right.
need to get away from the
Nutrients.
boxes. Yes, we need the nutrients
Right.
that comes from real stuff. So
Exactly.
that ties in with calories in, calories out. This whole, if you want to lose weight, make sure that you're eating less than you're outputting. So can you touch on that a little bit? What do you see? What do you recommend related to that phrase?
Yeah. This one's funny. You don't need a nutrition degree to know that this isn't the case, right? Because let's just start with the calories in piece, right?
Mhm.
It assumes that all the calories are equal.
Yeah.
And you don't need a nutrition degree to know that eating 100 calories of Skittles or 100 calories of carrots are going to be different for the body, right?
Some people
So,
some people think that they're the same.
right. but but we know because we would say, "Oh, I should eat the carrots." So we know on some level, right, that they're not the same.
Yeah.
And if we are focused on the nutrient density and the quality of the food,
Mhm.
the calorie element will take care of itself. And then in time, we might get to a place where we're making some tweaks.
Mhm.
But if what you're choosing are whole foods that exist in nature, right? That go from the ground or eat from the ground or can be traced back to nature, right?
Yeah.
Then we're good. We don't really have to worry as much about the calories.
Mhm.
On the calories out front, I mean, we all know this. At some point, you can't work out anymore in a day,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So fundamentally, calories in, calories out. And also, by the way, when you're working out, it's not like you can say to your body, hey, body, burn the Skittles, right? Like we can't tell it what to burn.
Yeah.
And what can happen is if we're not providing the body with nutrition and we are potentially overexerting or exerting more because we've been told to eat less and move more, right? The body will start to use its own muscle for fuel, which then decreases our muscle mass. Well, muscle is metabolically active.
Mhm.
So what can happen for anybody who's ever done, any kind of a diet where maybe we cut out whole food groups or we dramatically cut calories or we did anything, right? And I've done them all, right?
Yep.
We do these things, they work for a finite period of time. And by work, I mean the number on the scale goes down
Yeah.
and then it stops going down. and we get frustrated
Mm-hmm.
and we go back to old eating habits and the number on the scale starts to go back up.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened on the body when we dramatically cut calories or we cut out whole food groups or we do a lot of these things that we've been told to do?
Mm-hmm.
When the number on the scale is going down, what we're actually losing is water, muscle, and bone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the scale stops, because the body starts to protect itself and says, wait a minute, I'm going to survive. I'm not going to give you any more of these things, right? Then we get annoyed. We go back to old eating habits, but now we have less muscle on our body to be burning the extra fuel that we're now taking in. And the scale creeps back up. But because we have less muscle, we're gaining the weight back as fat. So we could end up at the same number on the scale as we were before, but by body composition, we can be fatter at that same number. So we lose it as water, muscle, and bone, gain it back as fat. Lose it as water, muscle, and bone, gain it back as fat. And that's why you may have heard people say the more times we live on that yo-yo, the harder it can be to remove it for good,
Makes
right?
sense. Mm-hmm.
And so it speaks to the importance of understanding nutrition and building muscle, because muscle is metabolically active. So instead of eat less, move more, I want you to think quality in, quality out, get up and move more.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So quality nutrition is going to give us quality energy, and we're going to move to build muscle.
Yeah. That's fabulous. Well said, well explained. And I think that will help people really hit home that, okay, look at your plate, see what's
Yeah.
on there. Is it laden with some kind of process that made it, with some chemicals that made it taste good?
Right.
Really just pause and take a look at it and see, okay, can I adjust how I'm preparing my meals and taking food in? So, and that I think will help people not only, like you said, have more energy, but feel better, because
Absolutely.
we know that there is a very strong connection emotionally between our food and our moods and how we behave in this world. So, what are your thoughts on this connection between our mood and food and this strong interplay?
Yeah. So this could be a whole episode onto itself. Okay. Fundamentally, our mood is a function of neurotransmitters.
Mhm.
Okay. These communicators in the brain and throughout the body. The building blocks of neurotransmitters are amino acids.
Mhm.
Amino acids are also the building blocks of protein,
Mhm.
which is why I mentioned if we're not getting enough protein, you're probably going to notice your moods are a little volatile,
Mhm.
right? Or you're a little cranky. So,
Yep.
and a lot of times when we're craving sugar, what we actually need is protein. It's our body trying to get some energy and some fuel to the brain and to compensate
Mhm.
for the lack of nutrients to do what it needs to do. So, fundamentally, understanding hormones and neurotransmitters, the building blocks for that require nutrition, right? And then these days also, there's a lot of conversation about the vagus nerve, right? So the vagus nerve, as you know, is the literal connection between the gut and the brain,
Mhm.
okay? For this conversation, here's what I want you to remember about it. Think of the vagus nerve like a 5-lane highway, okay? 3 of those lanes go gut to brain.
Mhm.
2 lanes go brain to gut.
Mhm.
We will never outthink the chemistry of what we are putting in the gut.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So we can try to mind over matter it. We can try to white knuckle it,
Mhm.
but it will always feel like climbing Mount Everest naked and barefoot if we don't start to get some nutrition in there first. Which is why when I'm working with clients, we start out with some of these nutrition pieces. We actually don't even talk about exercise and activity until we're about a month in.
Makes sense.
And we don't even start to think about the mind over matter pieces and our intellectual components and how do we think about our behaviors and how do we think about our confidence and vacations and all these other things till like the second half, because it will be infinitely easier once we're getting some nutrition there. All of a sudden, the moments when you have those cravings are going to be so clear what that pattern is versus sitting here and going, why can't I just not eat at night? Why do I suck? Right.
Yeah.
And that's often what happens when we're trying to sort of white knuckle it and figure it out and, waiting for lightning to strike to help us feel like, oh, we don't need to eat after dinner.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that all completely makes sense. This is great explanations. You have very clear descriptions and imagery for us.
Thank
You're
you.
Mount Everest naked and barefoot. So yeah, I do get it. And this is great. So as we're kind of wrapping up here, we touched on a lot of different areas. What would you say someone leaving here, what should they start with? What should the one thing that they should do besides reach out to you and work with you? What is the one thing that they should like pause and say, okay, I can change today?
I want you to start your day with protein.
Okay.
And specifically, like 30 grams of protein, which is about 4 ounces, maybe even a little bit more, right? Because if we've got biologically male bodies, we might want a little bit more. But 30 to 40 grams of protein at the start of your day within an hour to 90 minutes of waking up.
Okay.
That's going to adjust everything that happens the rest of the day.
Well,
And you're going to start to notice different things. You don't have to change a million things. And in fact, I'm going to say, don't change a million things at once. That's overwhelming, right? That's when we get the whole book of a diet on day one. We try to do all of the things and then we give up because it becomes a full-time job, right? We're like, I have to live a life. So if you can adjust tomorrow and every day to start your day with 30 to 40 grams of protein, so 4 to 6 ounces of protein, watch what happens.
okay. Great. That's great
Yeah.
advice. Great advice. Okay, so we talked about many great things. And if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way they can? And talk a little bit about your coaching, if you don't mind too.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. So I work with clients, either group or one-on-one. Both are available, and it's for 12 weeks.
Okay.
So this is not, oh my God, you're going to need me to live your life till the end of time. Nope. My objective is that for 12 weeks, we're going to build the tool belt so that you can go live the rest of your life. I do a lot in my practice with supplementation. So typically everybody has a personalized package that includes the coaching, the whole curriculum, the whole nine together, with a personalized supplement regimen, because what everybody needs is a little bit different. And the easiest way to reach out, everything starts with a complimentary discovery call. Let's see if we're a fit. Then from there, we might do an intake that's also complimentary. And then we can see what this would look like for you. I think we'll make sure that you have a link for the episode notes for a complimentary discovery call so people can just click and book. In addition to that, my podcast is Salad with a Side of Fries. So wherever you're listening, you can find us there. And then all social media, I am Jenn Trepeck, JENNTREPECK.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And can you tell us just real quick your website so people can take a peek at
Yes.
that too? I'll have the notes, but just go ahead and shout it out for people right now.
Sure. A salad with a side of fries.com. And please send a message, like pick your platform, send a message. I love hearing from you, like makes my day. So please send a message. I promise I will respond.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for being on today. I really appreciate you coming in. I know you have a busy schedule, so thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Amy. It's a pleasure.
Wonderful. And all of you, thanks for listening today. Thanks for joining. We will see you again next week. Have a great rest of your week, and please reach out to Jenn. Thanks. Bye.